So our next presenter is Fergus Sharkey. I won't do the bio again, Fergus, no, but we're again very appreciative of your support. And the title of our session here is Solid Biomass Proven, Scalable and Ready to Deliver. And Fergus is going to present to you the findings of the recent SEI Biomass Perception Study and also provide an update on sector supports. So I'd now call on Fergus to come forward and to deliver his presentation.
So I'm, good morning again, everyone. I'm just going to go through a couple of items this morning. I'm just going to talk about what my team does, which is we provide support to businesses from your corner shop to your large industrial user. I wanted, just for context, to talk about biomass and bioenergy's role just in terms of the national decarbonisation plan. I sometimes think that point is missed, and in terms of what SEI's perspective on it is, and so on. And then I'm going to be talking about our major scheme supporting biomass heating, which is the support scheme for renewable heat. I'm sure almost everybody in the room is aware of it. A little bit about perceptions work that we've been doing, because we think this is a significant barrier. An update on the scheme itself, and an update on the tariff review that's currently ongoing. My team, there's 25 of us in the team supporting businesses across every spectrum of Irish society, from the smallest to the largest, everything you can imagine. I think that gives us roughly 300,000 businesses that are our clients, if you wish. And I suppose we've been doing a lot of work over the last number of years to try and enhance and make more accessible our supports to businesses. And broadly speaking, we provide two sorts of supports to businesses. We can provide them with guidance and training and sort of capacity building, and we can provide them with funding. Obviously, a lot of the attention goes on the funding. That's sometimes where businesses start with us. And we've transformed a lot of these supports over the years, and we sort of structure them around a journey of understanding, assessing and investing. One of the things we've really focused on changing is our grant schemes, and that's been transformational over the last number of years. And I suppose we've gone from having, and again, we're talking about the SSRH this morning because it's relevant to this room, but in general, my team are sick of me saying there is no SSRH, there's no Exceed. We just have SEI business grants, and we basically have two. We have a rapid approval set of grants, which are for a set menu of measures. Most of those measures are capital things like solar PV or solar thermal, and some of them are for things like audits or optimizing existing BMS or supporting a business with the design of a retrofit on their building. And they didn't exist a couple of years ago. A business can go on today with some simple information about their company, the contractor they plan on using, and the measure itself. For PV, you just need to know what size the system is. People will know that who are working on that scheme, and they'll get instant approval. So that's been quite transformational. And then we have, for bigger investments mainly, we have what we call tailored support. And the SSRH as a biomass support sits within the tailored support. But the SSRH is also a grant for heat pumps, including heat pumps with significant building retrofit, from glazing to fabric to upgrading entire HVAC systems within buildings. We have Exceed, and we have our community grant as well, and we support a huge amount there. Broadly speaking, about 90% of the businesses we supported last year and this year are through the rapid approval lane, and about 10% are through the other lane, by volume. But by the amount of money expended and by the amount of tons of CO2 abated, it's about 50-50. So you have a high volume of small grants coming through the left lane, and you have a small volume of very big supports coming through the right lane. And our typical SSRH support, because it's a 15-year tariff, might be 300,000 to 500,000. It's quite a big grant that we give out. So we've transformed the business. These are all the different things that have been added and enhancements. And the SSRH, the last time we did any changes on it was in 2023. And I'll come back to the SSRH at the moment from a biomass side and from a heat pump side. I'm not going to talk too much about heat pumps. But it is important to state that there's been an enormous uptick in the amount of businesses that we're supporting, both the number of businesses and the amount of funding that's actually being provided. I should have updated that till the end of September because I have the figures now, but it's the end of August, which was the last time I had updated this. And it excludes our community grant, which is another big support to business. There's a lot that goes out there. So this year, for the first time, we really started talking about what our supports were. We never really had a business offering that we felt, or certainly I felt, that we could market. So we had a big marketing campaign which ran in May and September, and we're talking about business supports holistically. We're not trying to market a specific technology. We're not trying to market a specific scheme. We're trying to market a suite of supports that businesses can come in, save energy, start their journey, whether they start with solar or biomass, heat pump, fabric, or just something really, really minor on their building. So the key kind of message is SEAI from a business supports program is in a rapid growth phase, and we hope to sustain that. We're working very closely with our partners across government to achieve that, to get more impact, to support businesses. And things pivot. It's about energy costs right now again. It was about energy costs in 2022, I can tell you. We had businesses calling us, at the cusp of closing down, looking for support, looking for ways to tackle their energy costs. That's come back up the agenda, and decarbonisation as a more sort of, let's call it societal kind of public good from a business perspective, ESG is starting to come down the agenda. But being more efficient and tackling energy costs will never not be important to businesses. Just to zoom out a little bit, and it's kind of important in a conference like this, and it goes back to what I said about at the start. Ireland's national decarbonisation plan basically has three major components: a reduction in energy demand through efficiency measures, an increase in electrification, and an increase in bioenergy. And I think often bioenergy isn't given the sort of credit it deserves, but if we look at SEAI's national energy projections, we can actually see that a lot of this is about making sure demand doesn't increase beyond what would be reasonable. So energy efficiency generally, it reduces energy demand, but at the same time you get growth, you get economic growth, so you're sort of, in a way, sustaining or capping demand. So broadly speaking, energy efficiency is making the problem less, and then we're trying to change the fuel mix. And you can kind of see here that the two key tools for doing that beyond energy efficiency, just suppressing demand growth, are renewables and electricity. So more renewable electricity and more electrification means you're switching from oil and gas and transport and heat over to electricity. You get an efficiency bump if you use a heat pump or an EV. So you actually suppress demand in terms of real terms. And increasing renewables. So that renewables line is part of its heat pumps because ambient heat, but it's only the ambient. It's not a major factor of it. It includes biomethane. It includes biomass. So that is a really important tool. And this only goes out to 2040 on this projection, but it's a really important tool to reduce fossil fuel demand. And that's just a kind of a key message. From a national strategy perspective, bioenergy plays a really significant role and needs to be accelerated. So zooming back into what we do on a day-to-day basis, and we're running an SSRH scheme. One of the key things we picked up over the last number of years, we have an incentive out there. We think that incentive has diminished somewhat in terms of what's happening out in the market. That's anecdotally and what we can see from analysis. But we think, beyond, we can provide an economic incentive, we can encourage people to uptake biomass, but we believe there's an incentive barrier. And briefly, in 2022, as part of an annual review of the program, we did some stakeholder interviews. A lot of this was just on the SSRH itself, like the processes, what scheme criteria, and a lot of it came out of that, particularly on the heat pump side, kind of unlocked it. It was a scheme that supported heat pumps that day, but it didn't really, and we now have a significant number of heat pump applications approved, and that's growing all the time. It has become a heat pump scheme in many ways. But one thing that came out of those interviews was that there wasn't preference for biomass heating among the majority of stakeholders, and they were citing numerous what we would call perception barriers, whether they're real or imaginary. We could have long discussions about, but the fuel sustainability concerns, the hassle factor, that's a quote, not me, mixed previous experiences, fuel quality, fuel handling, maintenance, and the lack of design and installation, so the lack of supply chain was kind of cited. So we weren't really trying to get that information from the time, but it came back very strongly in those interviews. It was only 25 interviews, so we did a much wider survey. We pushed it out everywhere. We got 101 responses, and our friends in IrBEA also pushed it out to their network, and we got a significant number of additional responses over the 101. And when we looked at that, you know, the vast majority of those respondents, commercial energy users, are looking to renewable heating systems. Heat pumps was their first priority, and biomass was their second priority. There's not a lot of options on the table. And when they're selecting a system, cost, environmental impact, and feasibility are their top decision-making factors. And biomass was seen by the majority as a sustainable fuel and cost-effective. But again, a lot of these perception barriers arose. High capital cost, technical complexity, long-term reliability, limited supply chain, limited maintenance supply chain, concerns around emissions, fuel quality storage. Particular concerns came up around the environmental credentials, whether it was a transition fuel that was going to become harder and harder or even hard, you know, would face higher thresholds, emissions and biodiversity impacts of the fuel, and then the fuel cost and availability. You know, rising fuel costs were seen at the time of the survey. Biomass fuel costs were increasing, and then regulatory uncertainties about the future use of fuel. So I think I stood up here 2 years ago and started talking about this, and I was looking to leave the room with my life, but we've gone out and we've really checked the pulse on this. This is a major challenge for the biomass sector, and we need to work together to address some of these perceptions. But it's hard, you know, I think they're quite deeply ingrained. So our scheme, the SSRH, supports biomass with a 15-year tariff. It supports AD biogas with a 15-year tariff. But we've never had a single application. I can mention that very, very quickly. And I'll just give an update on where we are at the moment. So we've had a real slowdown in applications to the scheme over 2024, but particularly this year. And the majority of our projects that come in are quite small. They're agriculture projects, hotels, nursing homes. And we, since the start of 2024, have had to place a cap of 1 megawatt on the scheme. And a decision that we made, the government made, to expand to the ETS sector has been delayed because of this state aid cap, which we're actively working through. So I suppose, you know, the news there isn't overly positive, right? So it's a very important time for the scheme, which I'll touch on at the moment. We've given out 144 offers over the lifetime of the scheme. 92 of those are active offers, and 52 were not progressed. So a successful application was received. I don't think we've had many non-successful applications. I think we have close to 100% success rate in giving an offer if someone makes an application. And 52 of those were decided not to progress. That gives us a total 15-year commitment in terms of tariffs of 38 million. That's the same figure as it was a year ago. I think it's roughly the same figure as it was 2 years ago, which essentially is applications coming in and some applications coming out. And that will abate 21 kilotons of CO2 annually. And really importantly, and a credit to Paula and her team, we've 71 projects now in the payment cycle. That's really important. So then we have another roughly 20 projects that are in construction or just trying to get on the payment cycle or at the end of the stage, or maybe making a decision beyond that. So the scheme uptake is stagnating, and we've really focused on getting projects onto payment cycles as soon as possible. We've a lot of work put in on that. One of the key challenges in doing that is compliance with the scheme requirements, and there are many, and that is a big challenge. But trying to reduce the amount of requirements has been challenging because the evidence is compliance is poor, planning with building control, with fire certification, all of these kind of things that matter are legal requirements. But we've struggled to get to the point that we can walk back from that, and we've probably had to take too big a regulatory role in it. We are actively addressing the state aid constraint on the scheme, and now we're at the 2025 tariff review, which is a really important juncture for the scheme. And I'll finish up by just mentioning that. So we administer the scheme on behalf of the minister, is how it's, so we don't make decisions on the scheme, we administer it. And we are obliged to conduct a tariff review annually. The last, what I would call full review, was actually 2022, but we did reviews in 23, 24, we're obliged to, but they didn't They didn't go to the depth of kind of really analysing the tariffs and really pulling in the latest inputs and so on, which is an enormous task. So what are we looking at right now? We're trying to look at the tariffs to see are they appropriate, to see can they change. CapEx has increased with recent inflation. That won't surprise people. Fuel difference between biomass and fossil fuels has substantially decreased. Biomass fuel is actually cheaper just at a fuel level than fossil alternatives in most cases. That's a big headwind to the scheme. And there's just been massive volatility over the last number of years in fossil fuel and biomass prices. So trying to figure out where do you start and how do you cater for that is important. If we expand to the ETS sector, that has an impact on tariffs, so we really are looking at that in details. And we now have different policy coming in on top of the scheme, the RHO, so interaction with that is a complication. I said at the start about how complicated it was, yeah. So our core focus in the team is to try and look at the incentive effect, because if there are perception barriers, we need to increase the incentive effect. If there's a lack of uptake, we need to increase the incentive effect. So we're really thinking about the upfront CapEx and how we can address that. So our next steps right now are to finalise the review and submit it to DCE for recommendation in the next month or so. So that's everything from me. Sorry if I got 30 seconds over. Thank you very much, and will I sit here or come back up? Okay. Thanks very much, folks.
Thanks very much, Fergus, for your presentation, and certainly lots of food for thought. I know the whole issue of perceptions of biomass is something that's very much of a focus for our members, and we tried to address some of those issues by publishing the solid biomass capacity statement last year at this stage, or earlier this year. And also, I suppose I'd like to formally acknowledge Fergus and Paula for their work and engagement on the SSRH programme. I know we have challenges in terms of getting more projects into it and everything, but we look forward to working with you about how the scheme can move forward from here and how we can get more projects into it. But I would like to formally acknowledge your support to IrBEA and our members around the programme.